Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Tracie Harris. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
That was Alan Parsons' project, I Wouldn't Want to Be Like You, for the intro music. How's everybody doing? We are live. This is a public access television program. We will take live callers. We'll have the number up for you shortly. Today's February 17th, 2008. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us again this week. The Atheist Experience airs every Sunday from 3 to 4:30 p.m. in Austin, Texas on cable channel 10. And also the audio portion is available as a podcast download, and the video is now available on Google Video, and has been, along with all the past episodes. So if you missed anything, or if you want to go back, you can go to atheist-experience.com, click on Archives, and there's a complete listing of all the past shows along with the topics. So if you have something that you're curious about that we may have covered in the past, I know we've done shows on Scientology and various other religions. And occasionally we'll get emails from people saying, hey, why don't you do a show on this? And the first response is normally, we have, actually. And if you go back and find it, there's some good information there. But we tend to cover topics repeatedly because there's not always the same people watching and not always the same people co-hosting. And, of course, the callers tend to direct a lot of what happens on the show. So I'm sure we'll hit topics many times. And when we put the phone number up, you're welcome to comment on what we're talking about or anything that concerns you. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, beginning at around 11:30, except for the first Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. March 2nd is the first Sunday of March, and we'll be having our lecture series there. ACA member and physicist Mark Lowy, who is actually on the program filling in, we'll be giving the next lecture on black body radiation. So while we typically stay close to atheism and church-state separation issues, we do also branch out into other things that we enjoy and educational issues, evolution, astronomy, and there may end up being some more astronomy on the show in the near future. Somebody wrote in saying, you guys keep talking about this creation versus evolution thing. Why don't you spend a little bit more time talking about cosmology and astronomy? And I'm hoping to do that pretty soon because they're interesting fields, and I'm sure Tracie and I may actually touch on some of this a little bit later on. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. That's PROPHETS. You can go to nonprofitsradio.com for more information about that program. It's hosted by Dennis LeBay, features myself, Russell Glasser, and Schilling. We were on yesterday, so yesterday's podcast is already up. We'll be on again in 2 weeks, which I believe is March 1st. And that program airs every other Saturday from 2 to 3:30 p.m. We don't take live calls, but we do run a chat room in conjunction with the program. So if you want to listen live and participate and talk to some of the other listeners, that's a possibility. And if not, if you'd just rather download the podcast and listen to it on your own, you're more than welcome to do that as well. Nonprofitsradio.com is the address for that. You can find links to these, both the Nonprofits Radio site and the Atheist Experience site, from the ACA's main website. You can go to www.atheist-community.org. There's a lot more information there about the ACA organization, information about board members, bylaws, joining the ACA, products, whatever. If you're interested in finding out who we are and what we do, you can go to that website. And if you don't find the information you're looking for, there are feedback forms on the website that you can use to contact people, or you can email info@atheist-community.org. You can email president@atheist-community.org to get directly to me. And you can also, if you're involved in the TV show, or you don't want to be on the air, or you don't get through, you can send any feedback, questions, concerns, criticisms to tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, most of the co-hosts, some of the people behind the scenes. We can't promise to answer every email, but we do read all of them, and we tend to respond to quite a few of them. So. And a lot of the changes that we're talking about making have come from feedback from listeners. Now that the Google video is up, we're getting email from around the world. Lots of comments, some praise, some not so praiseful comments. Can't please everybody, and I'm certainly not going to try to start now. In addition to the programs and regular events of the ACA, we also have a number of social events throughout the week, including Atheist Happy Hour at the Dog and Duck Pub on 17th and Guadalupe, beginning around 7 o'clock and lasting until everybody decides to go home. We're done talking, we're done drinking, we're done eating, we're heading out, and I'll see you next week. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to any of our events. You don't have to be a member to attend. If you're coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, please don't. Just call in or email or find some other way to prompt the discussion. We're more than happy to have the discussion, but not necessarily while we're eating and hanging out with our friends. As a note to members, the March newsletter should be going out very soon. I just saw the first draft Tracie put together. And by the way, I bless the newsletter and blah, blah, blah. If you're an ACA member and you have newsletter submissions, you can email editor@atheist-community.org. We're accepting all submissions. If you want to, give your personal testimonial or review a book or a movie or comment on some current event, feel free. Also, if you have activity suggestions that you're interested in participating in, please feel free to mail those along as well. In addition to the lecture series and everything else, we've got a number of things coming up. March 7th, we're having the first ever Atheist Community of Austin pub crawl. If you're a member of the ACA or a prospective member or a friend of ours that would like to come down, what we're going to do is go downtown, and we've got some T-shirts made up, and we're just going to go in as a group and hit a pub and walk to the next one and just have a good time, have some good discussion, maybe prompt some conversation. It sounds like a really fun idea. Additionally, I'd like to announce for those people that we talked about this before, but for those who are interested, it's 8 p.m. at the Dog and Duck on Thursdays. Sorry, evidently we moved it, or I was always wrong, and just got there early. But for the people who've been asking, yes, Dawkins is coming to Austin, March 19th, 7 p.m. at the Hog Center on the UT campus. We'll have more information when we get it. I have no idea what that means, and the flashing red just completely threw off my concentration here. But Dawkins will be here on the 19th, 7 p.m. Hog Center. There'll be more information. It's being sponsored by CFI and the Atheist Longhorns. If you need links to either one of them, you can email us. I don't think we have links up on the website. I may get a news bulletin up there to kind of tip everybody off on that. So I think that's it for all the regular announcements. Did you have a good Valentine's Day?
Yes, I did.
Did you do anything in particular special that we can talk about on the air?
Nothing.
Just
Two
a day.
Exchanged cards.
The hearts and flowers and candies.
I actually hung up a pewter heart. Says nothing is worth more than this day.
Hoorah!
Yeah, Goethe.
So what do we got to talk about today? I know you kind of...
I wanted to talk about discrimination and also a little bit about agnosticism and how the two are sort of tenuously tied together, I think.
Because we end up getting, quite a few... This issue of definitions of words, of are you an atheist, are you an agnostic, a non-theist, a secular, it's this big, muddy...
It gets mired.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to kind of try and clear that up a little bit more today and talk about it.
Hopefully, yeah, that would be good.
All right.
I wanted to start with something that I saw in the paper, I think it was last weekend, I guess, and it was a little bit disturbing. I'm always disturbed when I see people promoting discrimination, but especially when it's my government officials and my personal government representatives that are promoting discrimination. I don't like to see that. So this was a little disturbing, and I wanted to sort of preface this. There's a little bit of a issue going on with the Boy Scouts of America, and I want to say that first of all, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a group of young people out and doing some camping and roasting weenies and teaching them survival skills and honor, and all of that is perfectly good, and I support that.
Because all that knot tying can come in handy next Valentine's Day.
There you go. Depends on your preferences.
Ooh, we're going to get a call about that one.
Yeah, that's why they won't let you lead a troop. Anyway, there, personally, although I don't personally admire bigotry or prejudice, I do understand that people in their personal lives can be bigots and they can be prejudiced, and that's legal. You can legally be a bigot, you can legally be prejudiced, and you can legally voice your bigotry and your prejudice. And you can even behave in a prejudicial fashion toward other people, and it's completely legal for you to do that personally, as long as you're not harming somebody.
Not only that, but as much as we might dislike bigots, as much as we might dislike the opinions of people with which we vehemently disagree, we have to actually work to protect that right because
Absolutely.
it protects everybody.
Yeah.
The freedom of opinion and expression and thought.
I have said numerous times that the protections on freedom of speech and freedom of expression would not be there for if all speech was considered sanctioned by society.
Right.
It's the speech that makes people uncomfortable. It's the speech that makes people want to shut someone down that needs protection. You don't need protection for saying things that everybody condones or
Right.
that most people condone. The person that needs to be protected when they speak is the person who is saying something that people don't want to hear, that people would want to silence. That's the only reason to have protections of expression.
This is actually one of the reasons why, despite what people may think of him, Larry Flint's one of my personal heroes for his fights with regard to First Amendment rights, and they made a strong point, both in the movie about it and in the case, that unpopular speech is the only kind of speech that needs protection.
Right.
Because nobody's going to object to popular speech.
Right. Who would you protect that from
Right.
if everyone endorses it? So, with that in mind, I just want to say that, it's even social clubs, as much as people don't like it, a social club can discriminate. You can set up a club and say, I will only allow this type of person in, and I'm not going to allow these other types of people in. And you can discriminate in ways that, for example, our government can't do.
Right.
So there is no beef or there's no problem other than a personal issue. There's no legal issue with a group like the Boy Scouts discriminating or being prejudicial or bigoted toward other particular groups of people. However, when they try to get the government to endorse that by doing things like promoting the group or like doing a drive for membership in schools or meeting in a public school place or using a place that is donated by like the government hall or a government facility, then you run into a problem because it's not legal for the government to discriminate. So while the group itself can discriminate, and that's perfectly legal, it's not perfectly legal for the government to aid them in doing that.
Right, and they do. I mean,
Right.
the Boy Scout Jamboree every year is held at land owned by the military that I think they
Right.
rent for $1 or something.
Right,
like that.
and that's the other thing. I'm not, hopefully, I'm not considered prejudicial or bigoted person, but if I were to say something that was bigoted or prejudicial, I am in no way protected by the law from social repercussions to what I say.
Right.
So, of course, barring harm or something criminal, like nobody could come and do something criminal to me, and that would be illegal. But if somebody wanted to, for example, speak back to me and say, I think you're a complete pig for your views, I have to deal with that because that's my view and I expressed it. And so when you express that view, you are not protected by the way that other people might view you, how they might react to you, whether or not they like you, whether or not they judge you to be an idiot or to be, somehow less, if they think you have a lack of character. That's up to them once you put that out there. So, go ahead.
And I'll apologize if I'm getting ahead of you, but this kind of ties into something that we see a lot, and that is, yes, you can be a bigot, and as Tracie pointed out, you have no legal protection from people saying, hey, we don't like what you're saying,
Right.
You're a moron, you're an idiot, you're the dregs of society. But what we see sometimes like this is people freely expressing, for example, their religious beliefs. And then when somebody comes along and objects to it and says, not only do I think this isn't true, but I think it's potentially harmful, I think it's, perhaps a delusion, then what happens is the person seems to get not just offended, but makes the accusation that the person who's objecting is violating their rights.
Right.
You're violating my rights of free expression. No, I'm not.
Right.
I'm exercising my own. It's a dialogue. I think,
Yeah, and I mean, you're not really getting ahead of me, but you are touching a little bit on something. I think I linked the article to you about the billboards.
Yeah.
And that, to me, kind of illustrates a little bit about what you're talking about, so I think we will hit on that a little. I don't want to belabor this too much, but I just want to say that, in principle, I don't have any problem with a group like Boy Scouts of America. And I support, anything that's going to give young people a productive, positive thing to do. When that group begins to teach young people to discriminate, to be bigoted, to be prejudiced, and then they want to use our government facilities to aid them in doing that, that's when I have a problem with it. So the group can exist. They can be bigoted, they can be prejudiced, they can discriminate even. I'll even stand up for their right to be discriminatory, but not tying our government into that.
Well, I'll stand up for the right to be discriminatory and bigots, but that doesn't mean I don't have a problem with the organization.
Right. Standing up for someone's rights is a lot different than agreeing with what they're saying or doing. It's just like like standing up for your right to free speech, even though I disagree with what you're saying.
I don't have a legal problem with what they're doing,
right?
Apart from government involvement, but I do have a problem with it. And one of the things that I think we can do to try and oppose groups like the Boy Scouts that we would generally consider prejudicial and harmful is to support other groups like Camp Quest and organizations that are, I think there's a secular scouting group as well. That don't have this. Now, the average Joe may say, "Well, you're just promoting your atheism. It's just the same as if you're a religion." No, we're not. I made this comment the other day, and I'll do it again. There's a gazebo on the lawn of the Capitol here in Austin, and it has no reference to God at all. This is completely secular, non-religious gazebo. Is it an atheist gazebo? Is it promoting atheism? Is it violating somebody's rights? Is it offending religious people? Is every scrap of land that doesn't have a monument to Jesus on it, is that some kind of atheist scrap of land? No, of course not. So when we talk about things like Camp Quest or the secular scouting or things like that, it's not a promotion of atheism, as if atheism was some ism that you could actually promote. It's a responsive position, which I'm sure we'll get to as well.
But I just wanted to kind of preface that part of it just to say that that's why this was particularly disturbing to me this weekend when I opened up my Austin American Statesman and saw an article about a book that was written by the Texas governor, Rick Perry. And there seems to be, I guess the issue gets a little bit, when you talk about muddying an issue, it gets a little muddied because you have the ACLU that is basically saying that, if you want the government to support you in some way, you can't discriminate because the government can't discriminate. It's not legal. And this becomes twisted into the idea that someone is trying to force the Boy Scouts to accept homosexuals and to accept atheists as scout leaders or into the group or as members. And the truth is they can discriminate all they want, but they just can't get the government involved in their discrimination.
Right.
So no one is trying to force the Boy Scouts to change. It's trying to let them know that if they want to be a bigoted, discriminatory, prejudicial group, the government can't endorse that. And that's all anybody's saying. Yeah. So if you hear something about this, I just want to make sure that it's clear that this wouldn't be in the courts if it was just about a social club that wasn't trying to use the schools, wasn't trying to use government buildings and for meeting halls, and that's where the problem comes in. So I don't think that if I were gay and as an atheist, I don't want my money going to promote groups that condemn me and are prejudicial toward me. That for the government to spend my tax dollars supporting that, it seems a little strange. Like, why would I want to support a group that's anti? It'd be like if I was, a Jew and having to pay taxes to, the German government during 1945. You just don't, that doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't want to do that, and I don't want to do that. Well, what I noticed is that in his fervor to defend the group that he supports, the Boy Scouts, and Perry was himself a Boy Scout, he says, whether it is protecting the rights of pornographers, molesters, perverts, terrorists, garden variety thugs, or those merely hostile to a belief in God, the ACLU is there to provide aid and comfort in addition, I'm sure he meant, to a well-funded legal arsenal. And so, in other words, in response to the ACLU saying you can't use the government to further your discriminatory views, he then throws out things like molesters and mixes it with terms which are in there. It's referencing homosexuals and atheists because those are the ones involved in the suit. And he refers to them as perverts and those merely hostile to a belief in God. Well, maybe there are atheists who are hostile to belief in God. I wouldn't speak for every atheist. I'm an atheist and I'm not hostile toward your belief. If not accepting your belief means being hostile toward it, then I guess then I'm guilty of being hostile toward your belief, but I really have issues with your definition of hostile. I'm not trying to shut down anyone's church. I'm not trying to pass laws against believing or preaching or teaching your children about what you believe if you believe in God. I'm not doing anything to stop anybody from freely speaking. In fact, I support your right to do that. And I don't see how disagreeing with your stance on my personal level makes me somehow a hostile person toward you.
Yeah. But it does, which is, I mean,
it does,
to some of
it
them.
does to people like Perry.
Right.
And that's what disturbs me, because this is a man who's supposed to represent my rights
Right.
in the government. He's the representative who is supposed to be looking out for my rights as an atheist, and I'm questioning whether or not somebody who says this can do that.
Well, it's a really confusing issue, and of course, I'm not a lawyer or an expert on these kinds of issues. Obviously, when somebody takes political office, they can't be required to just check their religion at the door. They still have the same right to their beliefs and opinions and things. However, when they're in office, they're expected to be a secular representative of a secular government to the
Right.
greatest extent possible. So while Governor Perry may have written this book as Rick Perry and not as Governor Perry, I don't know which one applies. I think that we're again causing problems and blurring the lines between what one should do and what one can do. When I see a government official like Governor Perry saying the things that he's saying, it's troubling, because, as you said, this is the guy who's supposed to be protecting the rights of all Texans.
I mean, he's comparing me here to someone who molests children.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't agree that just because I am not a religious person and because I don't believe that a God exists, that then makes me somehow harmful to children, or that I would be in a category linked with criminals.
Well, it's a complete mischaracterization of who's objecting to the practices of the Boy Scouts. It's also a complete mischaracterization of the ACLU. I don't know why I can't say that word today. Because he's portraying the ACLU as an organization that, just sets out to protect the rights of the worst possible elements of
which he puts me in, even though I go out and do community service, and I'm a good neighbor, and I'm a pretty good person,
and she's way nicer than I am.
I give to charities, and and I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, so I'm a good citizen of your state of Texas, and you're my representative, and you're saying that I'm right up there with child molesters. Well, thank you, Governor Perry. I appreciate your assessment of me as your citizen. That makes me just feel great about you being in office. And I also want to say, he says attempts by the ACLU to enable openly gay people or atheists and agnostics to lead Boy Scout troops amount to unwarranted attacks on religious believers. No, because you're allowed to discriminate. Again, you can discriminate. No one's trying to stop you from discriminating. They're trying to stop you from involving the government in helping you discriminate, and that's where the line draws. That's where it becomes illegal.
Now, in fairness, that's what the ACLU is doing, and they're battling things on a legal front. There are people who are trying to encourage the Boy Scouts to stop their bigotry and actually admit atheists and homosexuals.
Well, on a personal level, they can do that. I mean, that's what I said. That's
not a legal fight.
That's what I meant earlier when I said you can't be protected from every social repercussion of your actions. I mean, if you're going to be prejudiced, bigoted, and discriminatory, there are going to be people that don't like that, and they're going to call you on it and try to change your view because it's a harmful view.
Yeah, and he's saying that his actual phrasing is or the phrasing that's here is unwarranted attacks on religious believers. No, we're not doing. First of all, the attacks are warranted, and we're not attacking believers. We're attacking beliefs. There's a big difference there. I have no problem at all with individual believers. I happen to disagree with them. Where their beliefs are harmful, where they're trying to impose those beliefs on other people, where their beliefs bring down society and retard progress, that's where I have a problem. But I'm not, and I don't know anybody. I don't know any atheist who's launching unwarranted attacks on believers.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, to me, it's not an attack when someone simply says you can do whatever you want to do, but the government's not going to sponsor it. That's not an attack on me. Well, fine, let me do what I'm going to do, and I don't need the government to sponsor it. I will just go do what I like, and no one's attacking me. It doesn't matter if they don't agree with me, and it doesn't matter if they'd like me to change. They're not attacking me. I don't even know what to call that. But then to respond by turning around and, connecting me with child molesters is a complete overreaction. I don't even know how to respond to that, except that I find it personally disgusting and disturbing. And especially disturbing coming from a public official. But that, I don't know. It just sort of blows my mind a little bit that someone would go to that extreme and be that hateful in response to someone simply saying, can you be more inclusive? Could you be a little more inclusive? Oh, and what I wanted to do is try a little exercise here. I wanted to, instead of those hostile to belief in God and perverts, I thought we'd try replacing that with a couple of other social groups and see how that sentence reads when we plug in some different words and see how that feels. Okay, so what I'm doing is taking Perry's quote, I'm plugging in a couple of other groups, and let's see how this reads now. Whether it is protecting the rights of pornographers, molesters, perverts, terrorists, African Americans, or Jews, the ACLU is there to provide aid and comfort in addition to a well-funded legal arsenal. How does that quote sound when you hear somebody plugging in Jews with child molesters or blacks with child molesters? Like, does that ring really good with you? Because that's just what he did, except he did it to me. And I'm saying that doesn't feel good, and it's also incorrect. It's not correct. I should not be lumped in with a child molester simply because I don't agree with his view on religion.
Not only that, and we talked about, I mentioned a minute ago that, obviously you don't have to check your religious beliefs at the door, but Governor Perry, you're there as a representative of all the citizens of Texas, and your job is not to malign beliefs that are different from yours, to attack people and lump them in with child molesters just because they happen to disagree with you about your fairy tale. You're there to represent everybody. And it's despicable that, if you want to write this after you're out of office as a generic human being, that's fine. But while you're in office, it'd be nice if people held you accountable for the things that you said. It would be nice if people, if we didn't live in a state that was so happy to just walk lockstep with you on your moronic ideas. But if you're just going to, hey, you atheists and agnostics, you're in the same category with child molesters and rapists and garden variety thugs. Well, screw you, Perry. You don't represent us. You're not even making an attempt to. You're there. You might as well just be preaching a sermon. You might as well just be the average televangelist who happened to get his ass in office. Because I can't fathom a political leader in the 21st century who could be so openly hostile to people who simply disagree with him on an issue. If you treated your opponents that way in debates, I don't know what kind of election process we'd have. But yeah, Tracie's not hardly the only one that's offended about this, as I am. And there have been a number of blog posts about it as well. Martin posted something about it,
right?
And several other people have. There have been lots of problems with the Boy Scouts, but they were non-legal problems.
Right.
When the ACLU gets involved and tries to make some legal changes as to what kind of funding they can get from the government, what do people do? Well, some of us support that. Some of us discuss that. Some of us talk about the difference between legal action and social response, and some people who somehow managed to get elected to one of the highest positions in the land, of being a governor of an entire state in the United States, instead go on the attack.
Right.
And do it by flinging insults. Hey, I can fling insults too. I just did a minute ago. I can fling some more if you want. But I'd rather actually have a productive discussion about what's right and what's wrong. What should be allowed from a legal standpoint and what should be acceptable from a social standpoint. And while I'll defend the rights of the Boy Scouts to be as bigoted as they want to be,
correct,
I won't defend your right as the governor to attack the citizens of your state. It's insane that you're actually doing that, and that you're doing it to support something which is actually wrong. You are fractally wrong, Governor Perry. Fractally wrong is when you're wrong in the big picture and you're wrong at every subsequent magnification of any possible aspect of your position. You're wrong. Everywhere we look, you're wrong, just like a fractal.
Anyway, and then just to wrap it, I'm not going to belabor this anymore, but one thing I read in the quotes that it was just one of those pot calling the kettle black issues I was just like, can you project here? The liberal intelligentsia like to think of themselves as the only legitimate arbiters of morality.
Ooh.
Okay, this coming from somebody who thinks that being gay or atheist makes you right up there with a child molester, and he's saying that I'm being morally judgmental. Okay, I didn't say anything. I said, let them be bigoted, let them be prejudiced, let them discriminate. Just don't use our government to do it, and I got no problem with you. And the response to that is that I'm trying to dictate my morality onto somebody, when in fact, you've got this person saying the government should be involved in discriminating against people. It's like, no, that's saying that you need to dictate your morality. That's when you're dictating morality, when you start saying that the government needs to step up and be a part of this discrimination. It's like, no, that's not what my government is for.
Yeah, I'll support the KKK's rights to be bigots, and I don't
absolutely.
know why don't you support that, Governor Perry? I mean, obviously you're fine with bigotry, so much so that you're willing to treat those who disagree with you as if they were criminals and the worst possible members of society in order to try and bolster up an argument that's false. So why don't I see you out supporting the KKK? It's the same thing. They've got the same rights to discriminate that the Boy Scouts do.
Did you want to take the call and then we'll come back to this?
Sure. We got, is it Yassic?
Yes, hello again.
How you doing?
Very good. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, very good. Just calling back, and I have a topic which is slightly off of what you were talking about. So,
sure.
Basically, this has recently been a bigger problem for me. I am an atheist, and when I talk to various Christians, oftentimes we get to the topic of hell, with them talking about how I am damned to be in hell forever. Now, I'm having this with a friendly conversation with some of my close friends who are Christians. What really gets me is that they can talk about how I'm going to be eternally tortured, just forever and ever,
right,
and be completely calm about it. Just say it as if, it's raining today.
Yes.
That they don't seem to necessarily, at least most of the time, get emotional about it, or even have the conversation be different than as if they were just talking about the recent news.
Right.
Yeah.
My biggest problem is I don't understand how they seem to be doing that. My initial reaction usually makes me want to think that they don't actually believe that I'm going to be tortured for eternity, because if they did, they wouldn't be so calm about it. But on the other hand, they don't want to just say that I know what you do and do not believe, and just.
Well, I mean, there are some various Christian sects and individuals that'll flat out tell you, I don't believe you're going to go to hell. Matter of fact, there's a number of people I've had conversations with recently that think, oh, you're not going to hell. And my point to them is, okay, then what's the big deal about whether or not I believe? If I'm not trying to avoid a hell or gain entrance to a heaven that I actually want to go to, then why worry about it? But the people that you're talking about, I've met some people who make really impassioned pleas with regard to hell, where when they're talking to you and telling you that you're going to hell, they are actually physically, visibly shaken at the prospect. And then there are the people who you're talking about, the ones who are like, well, it's your choice. And what it is, I don't know how many of them actually believe in the concept of hell. Like you, I can't possibly guess. I can only, if somebody tells me they believe something, I tend to believe them until I see their actions betray what their true belief is. It may be that they've written it off as, this is God's decision, you deserve it, there's nothing more I can do about it, I've done my part to inform you of the situation, and now it's in your hands and I'm not going to worry about it. I think the real thing is not so much they don't believe in hell, it's just they don't care about you at all. They're doing what their duty is. They've been ordered by their religious teachers, their Bible and everything else, that they're supposed to go out and preach and proselytize and try and win people over to Christ, and that hell is one of the useful tools in doing this. But they don't actually care about you as a person, because if you actually cared about somebody as a person and you thought that they were at risk of being tortured forever in hell, it would be clearly obvious that you cared. And I think the people that you're running into don't care. They're going through the motions and trying to earn another credit on the crown. And
I do have something to add to this, though. Yassic, I had an exchange, well, not even an exchange, well, I guess it was, yeah, small exchange on a forum. And it's kind of along the lines of what you're talking about, where I was just stunned at somebody's lack of, I guess, caring about something, where I did actually, the last Atheist Eve, I think, was about this, where the guy, he was talking about God and morality, and how God is the author of morality. And I said, is this the same God that told the Hebrews to go and slaughter all the Amalekites, including all the women and children and animals and every infant? And he actually ended up defending that and saying that, God gives life and God can take life, and who are we to question? And I said, wait a second, you understand that they were told to go and slaughter children, that they went in and they were told to leave none alive and to kill every toddler and every infant. And you're saying that that is morally acceptable to you. And he was fine with that. And my response is that, I'm kind of like with you. I'm sitting there saying, if your religion can get you to say that mass infanticide is morally correct in some circumstances, I'm concerned about your belief. It concerns me, because you may be living next door to me, and I don't know, what you think God might tell you tomorrow. But if you think it's okay to kill babies, as long as your God says that's all right, then you're right up there with Andrea Yates as far as neighbors I'd like to not have.
And I've had a similar conversation with regard to the biblical command to stone unruly children. There's a guy that I'm having this discussion with. It was right after Dan Barker lectured here at UT, and I asked him, is that morally correct to stone unruly children to death? Thinking that, of course, like any reasonable person, he's going to say, no, maybe that part of the Bible wasn't inspired by God. Maybe they got that part wrong. It was never moral. But instead, because he's trapped into this presupposition that the Bible must actually be correct, and as it's the inspired word of God, it must be moral, his response was that yes, in fact, it was morally correct, but he qualified it by saying that it was morally correct for those people at that time. Well, yeah, but now he's established situational ethics,
right,
and the ability of the individual to consider situationally what actions are morally correct without any deference to divine instruction. And as long as you're willing to do that, I just won the argument, because my point is that I don't see any need for any divine instruction or any higher instruction at all about what morals are. We can determine them by ourselves as individuals and as groups. And the ones that we agree on as groups, those are the ones we enact as laws. The ones we disagree on, the ones where there's still some debate, those are the ones that are personal and they affect our personal choices. And that's where we get into disagreements about the Boy Scouts want to be bigots, and they're fine with that. They think that it's morally perfect for them to be bigots. And I disagree. I think it's morally corrupt for them to be bigots. But because we can't come to an agreement on it, there's not going to be a law like that.
But as you said before about how they could just not necessarily for the bigots, but for how you said that they might necessarily care. I'm just thinking the closest idea I can have to putting myself in their shoes would be if I would hypothetically be, say, a jail guard on death row. Even if I hate the person that's going to be executed, I despise whatever they did. If I have to come up to them and say, okay, now I'm going to have to take you to the next room where you're going to be killed,
right.
I mean, even that much, I just can't really imagine myself ever saying that calmly. I mean, I could see this would touch me every single time that I do it, even if I don't like this person, because I find that
what if you thought they deserved it?
Well, he said even if they were completely...
No, he said if he didn't like them. What if you thought they deserved it, that
okay.
they done... I mean, I'm not saying you could ever do that.
But I'm saying, even if I thought they deserved it, even if it was Saddam Hussein or Hitler that was on there, the worst
right.
person ever, I'd still, even if I know that they deserve it and I think that this should be a good thing for them to do so, I still won't be able to talk to them and say, you're going to go in there to get killed, neutrally. I mean, no matter how much I hate the person, I just can never really think
right.
that, okay, you're going to be die or you're going to be tortured, no matter how bad they are. It doesn't sit well with me that someone can just go that neutral.
That's what separates you from Hitler and Saddam Hussein, is because you know that this is something that's not good. It's not good to kill someone, and so to you it bothers you, even if you feel like it's necessary. You would still say, I still feel like it's unfortunately necessary.
We don't even have to go to Hitler or Hussein. That's what separates you from the people that we're talking about. You despite the fact that you're a godless heathen who should only be selfish, if you listen to these people who talk about what atheists are like, you actually care more about your fellow man than the people who've been preaching to you. You have more empathy, more compassion, you have more consideration. And I can't prove this, but I think it's because in general, those people who are atheists for intellectual reasons, those people who have considered the impact of what a godless universe actually means, they come to grips with the reality that this is your one shot at life, that it is intrinsically valuable, that it is the single most valuable thing that we have, and that it deserves to be protected, and that the same value that you place on it for yourself automatically applies to your fellow man. And I think it's a demonstration that what we see so many times, and I don't want to lump all Christians into one bucket. There's a guy, a Christian last week, who called to punch me in the face. I don't think he's representing the typical Christian. But on many levels, what we see from a lot of Christians is a false compassion or false consideration for their fellow man. And the reason why they can do it is because this life is not nearly as important as the next one. That's the underlying problem. Everything here pales and is diminished by this idea of an eternal afterlife that's going to be either bliss or torture, or non-existence, I guess.
I would understand if this was coming from a person like you described, and yes, I run into those people quite a bit as well. But the people I'm specifically talking about, they are my close friends. I mean, if they really didn't have any compassion for humanity, they wouldn't be my friends. I mean, I see them all the time. They spend a lot of the time helping others out, not for any reward, not just because God says them, but because they truly care. I mean, if someone goes through a breakup, they do help out each other very much. And in general, I'd say that they are very compassionate on every single other level. I mean, as much as you really can be.
Then maybe the individuals you're talking to don't actually believe it. I can't guess. Apart from what people say they believe, I can't get in their heads to figure it out. I think there's a number of reasons why they could be so nonchalant about it. Non-belief in the prospect is one of them.
Yeah, or sometimes it's just so drilled into you that you just don't even think about it. I mean, when it's become such an intrinsic part of your life from the time you were a child, and you've been told this is simply how it is and this is how it's going to be, and you believe that, then you're just like, oh, okay, whatever, that's just the way it is. And he doesn't believe he's going to hell, and that's justice, I trust God, okay.
Yeah, see, and that's a really important point, and I kind of wanted to make a comment on this from the other day. I've talked about my past a lot. Tracy and I both come from religious backgrounds, and I was raised, Southern Baptist in a good Christian home, and during my youth and teenage years, I was active in the church. But I didn't become an atheist until well after I was 30. But I was not super Christian. There were times, long periods of time, where my religious beliefs, I still had them. I still believed in them. I still believed in God and Jesus and heaven and hell and all these other things. But they had no impact on my daily life. I wasn't practicing. I wasn't involved. I wasn't concerned with it. And if I were to speak to somebody during that period of time, I would be, as most Christians at that time, what most Christians would identify as a poor witness or a backslidden Christian or whatever. So when I would talk to somebody in those times, I might have been more casual about hell than when I was actually active in the church and was more concerned about, saving people from eternal torture. Yeah. So it could just be the state of mind that they're in, that they're kind of on autopilot with their beliefs, and it's taken a back seat to real life. I don't know.
The other possibility which I'm thinking of is that it actually does touch them very much, but since they've had to, in essence, do it for so long, for telling people that you're going to hell and actually realizing what they're saying, that the only way they can really cope with this without simply dropping the belief, which they can't do, would simply, turn it off, stop thinking about it altogether.
That could be. Yeah. That could be.
Yeah, well, this is really all I had to talk about. Thanks. It helped out a bit.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Yassic.
I ran into it recently. Just really been, boggling my mind how they can do that. So I don't know.
I wish I had an answer. There's a whole bunch of questions about how can they do that I don't have answers for. But
yeah.
Thanks a lot for calling.
Thank you.
As a reminder to everybody listening, after the program's over, we're going to dinner at El Arroyo on 5th Street. The address is on your screen. Today's February 17th, 2008. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come down and join us. Have a good meal, some drinks, conversation. I guess you want to take... Yeah, we want to take one more call since
Sure.
I think this one may actually kind of relate to Governor Perry. Is it Dan?
Yeah.
How you doing, Dan?
Good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, I first want to say I just like your show. I
Thank
caught
you.
it randomly by accident once, and I just liked watching ever since.
Great.
I work up at the Capitol. I was glad to hear you mention the Perry stuff. I hear the things that I don't know if you were aware of that go on up there, but during session, they actually have a prayer every morning on the Senate floor before session starts. Things like that.
That's actually common at all levels of government. And on the one hand, I would tend to object to it because I think that it does qualify as a government endorsement of religion. But most bodies that I've seen try to do a pretty good job of spreading it around to where even some of them have invited atheists and agnostics in to give a secular devotional. Unfortunately, on the few times that it's happened, the religious folks get all pissed off and upset about how dare you invite some atheist in here to talk to us and march out.
Even the Hindu, though.
Yeah, and they did the same thing to a Hindu.
Yeah.
So I personally think that the best thing we can, as much as I'd like to allow people, I talked about not checking your religion at the door just because you're in public office. As much as I'd like to allow this process to continue, and it's impractical and evidently, based on the reaction of some people, impossible for us to implement this practice fairly. So I think it needs to go away. Let them get to work. Pray before they get there. Pray outside in the hallway before the session starts. We don't need to do it officially.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you one question. I'll hang up after I ask it. But you mentioned the ACLU lawsuits. Do you know of any other legal actions that have been taken, in the past or otherwise, about stuff like just religion in government, like prayers on the Senate floor, or
There's tons of it.
moments of silence?
FFRF is probably a place that could...
Freedom from Religion Foundation has done a lot from it. You can go to ffrf.org. Actually, Michael Newdow has a new case right now to try and get Under God out of the pledge again. He's been kind of shopping this around to different... The problem with his original case was that he didn't have standing. So now he's actually working as a lawyer representing other people, trying to get this removed. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday on the nonprofits because people have been commenting on what Newdow's doing and just saying all kinds of horrible things. We need to ship him off to China if he doesn't want to live in a country that acknowledges God. He's ignoring our Christian heritage. And people, I kid you not, whoops, sorry. I kid you not, a lot of people, some people aren't going to find this surprising at all, and some people are just going to say that I'm wrong. But they'll post on there things that, like, a fact is a fact. You need to go read the writings of our founding fathers who founded this nation as a Christian nation on biblical principles. Yeah, you're right. A fact is a fact. And your facts are completely wrong. Fractally wrong. I get to use that one again. There's a lot of good information out there. People, I kid you not, they stand there and they suggest, you should go read this. Well, those of us who have know how wrong you are. During the Continental Congress, people tried to inject God and Jesus and other religious ideas into the Constitution, and without fail, every single time they were voted down. That doesn't mean that all the founding fathers and those members of the First Continental Congress were atheists and agnostics. No, they weren't. They were Christians. They were deists. They were, Puritans, Lutherans, Presbyterians. They were agnostics. They were atheists. Very few probably use the atheist label because in what we'll maybe get to here shortly is what the terminology, what it means, and which one's in vogue or subject to use at any given time has changed. But the fact of the matter is, the United States Constitution is based on secular principles that came out of the German free thought movement. It's a government of the people, by the people, for the people. The rights of the government are derived the power of the government is derived from the rights of the governed, or the permission of the governed.
Correct.
I got it all completely wrong. The point is, it's not, you can say we're a Christian nation, and you know what? I'll agree with you. As long as all you mean is that the majority of people in the United States are Christian. But by that reasoning, we're a white nation, we're a female nation, we're a heterosexual nation. You can make anything like that. But what you're really saying is the United States was founded on Christian principles. No, it wasn't. Not to any degree more than any other principles. I mean, the principles that you want to identify as Christian that the United States was based on, some of them I can't find in Christianity at all. The idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the idea of freedom of religion, seem to kind of violate the "I am the Lord thy God; thou shalt have no other gods before me," and the prohibitions against all kinds of things. It's just nuts. And so these people are like, "Oh, we need to chuck Newt out. How dare he?" I'll tell you how he dares, because he's protected by the Constitution. And you know what he's doing? He's trying to protect the Constitution that protects him. Under God wasn't added to the pledge until the 50s under McCarthyism. It wasn't in there originally. And by the way, the pledge isn't from the Founding Fathers. It was written in the 1890s. And the same thing with In God We Trust and the Money. But we're getting way off track. And I want to get back to what you wanted to talk about, because I think it's important.
I think I did have something about a billboard, but maybe we should talk about agnosticism for a little bit, because we're running out of time, and then get to the billboard if we have time. The reason that I wanted to bring up agnosticism, a while back I had done some reading about Rome, ancient Rome. And one of the things I read that was interesting is that the different classes of Romans, and sometimes even according to your job, people wore clothing that identified them. Like if you were a member of a Senate, you had like a particular border that went on your tunic that identified you as a member of the Senate. And if you were a member of a certain class, you wore a certain type of clothing that identified you. It wasn't just a matter of that's an expensive looking tunic, so you must be upper class. There literally were like special cuts and styles of clothing that delineated where you fit in the society.
Do the colors fit in this too? Because I know purple is the regal color.
So they did have like the border would have been a specific color for the Senate. Well, one of the things I remember reading was that the common class wore the same clothing as the slaves, which I thought was a little bit weird, that you'd have all this delineation and then slaves wouldn't be delineated with a special type of clothing. Well, apparently, that was an issue that came up in the Roman Senate, and it came up more than once. And every time it came up, it would be voted down, and it was always voted down for the same reason, which was we do not want the slaves to be able to identify themselves when they're out in the market. So when the slaves were released into, the Roman slaves did things like go shopping for the family. It wasn't like they were chained in a house somewhere or locked in quarters. They went out and did daily duties and whatever. Well, they didn't want them to understand how big their numbers were in the main cities, because that was dangerous for the slaves to recognize that you had more slaves than you did citizens on any given day wandering around the market. So with that in mind, why I'm bringing that up is because I think that a lot of times anonymity works for people who discriminate. So if you want to discriminate, if you want to have somebody that you're going to step on and that you're going to treat badly and that you're going to defame, it helps to have that group disenfranchised, disorganized, and keep the individuals as anonymous as possible so that they can't identify one another.
Right.
And the more mixed up you can keep it, the more powerless you keep that group. And I think that there is a movement, and I think on some levels it probably is purposeful, but I think that on most levels that I experience, it's not purposeful. I think it's just the the confusion that sort of trickles down from the more purposeful, misleading comments that keep people confused about exactly what an atheist is. And a lot of times the confusion comes in with atheism and agnosticism, where a lot of people will say, I'm not an atheist, I'm an agnostic. And I know we've hit this before, and if you go online, it's hit sort of ad nauseum, but I just think that it's very important to keep in mind that it's not just a definition. This is not just a semantic issue. This is an issue that keeps a lot of people who are atheists from even understanding that they're an atheist, and even understanding that, what atheism actually is. Because I probably run into as many atheists who are confused about this as I do theists.
Yeah.
So let's just look at a little bit of information about agnosticism and see where that goes. Let's see. It's a philosophical view that the truth value of certain claims, particularly metaphysical claims regarding theology, afterlife, or the existence of gods, deities, or even ultimate reality, is unknown or, depending on the form of agnosticism, inherently unknowable due to the nature of subjective experience perceived by that individual. So what they're saying is, you're either going to say that you don't know it or that you don't think anyone can know it. So in other words, there's this realm in which you personally have no knowledge, or where you will assert that no one has any knowledge. And the realm is generally religion with regard to agnosticism.
And not just that no one has any knowledge, but potentially that no one could have knowledge.
Yeah, right.
There is the idea that the question itself is nonsensical, that it can't be answered, that it's beyond our ken forever and all time.
Right, and that's something that is it's sort of, you can go that route. You don't have to. You can say that it's unknown to us right now, but we might know it later. Or you can say it's unknown now and it's just unknowable ever. But this is where agnosticism is coming from. There's a lot of different definitions for agnosticism that they listed in, this is just a little bit of overview on Wikipedia, and we're going to get into also a little bit more from Britannica. But they list strong agnosticism as the view that the question of the existence or non-existence of an omnipotent God and the nature of ultimate reality is unknowable by reason of our natural inability to verify any experience with anything but another subjective experience. So that would sort of be the person sitting around saying, we can't really know anything, because we're just subjective beings and we just know it's almost like the Matrix type of philosophy.
It's
where,
kind of a nihilistic...
Right. I might be a brain in a jar. I can't tell what's real. I don't know.
Solipsism.
Right. And I mean, there's certainly something to be said for it, but you can't live your life as though you're a brain in a jar. So,
and we've had, I can't count the number of conversations about this, and a lot of this comes down to this notion of absolute certainty, which I'm sure we'll touch on at some point. So.
Yeah. Mild agnosticism is the view that the existence or non-existence of God or gods is currently unknown, but it is not necessarily unknowable. Therefore, one will withhold judgment until or if more evidence is available. So in other words, I can't say that God exists. I don't know whether or not it does, so I can't really say I believe until I have some more information. The apathetic agnostic is the view that there is no proof of either the existence or non-existence of God or gods, but since any God or gods that may exist appear unconcerned for the universe or the welfare of its inhabitants, the question is largely academic anyway. So what they're saying is, I don't see a reason to believe in God, but if there is a God, he doesn't appear to be involved, so what difference does it make? That would be the apathetic agnostic. The pragmatic agnostic is the view that there is no proof of either the existence or non-existence of gods. So that's sort of the unknown, I guess, for now, because they're saying there's no proof. I don't know if they would accept that there could be proof later. The model agnostic, the view that philosophical and metaphysical questions are not ultimately verifiable, but that a model of malleable assumptions should be built upon rational thought. This branch of agnosticism does not focus on a deity's existence. And I think that model agnosticism is close to Huxley's version of it, that there is no, they're not verifiable, but that you need to build your assumptions on rational thought. Agnostic theism is the view of those who do not claim to know the existence of God or gods, but still believe in the existence. And then you have agnostic atheism, the view of those who do not know of the existence or non-existence of God or gods and do not believe in them. And they further flip-flop that and say atheist agnostic, the view that God does not exist unless he exists outside of time and space. However, one cannot reasonably assume that outside of space and time even exists, nor can one assume that outside of space and time doesn't exist. Therefore, the God claim can never be asserted outside of logic, but based on logic, God does not exist. And agnosticism was something that I guess I hadn't heard in a while, but when I reread it recently, I was like, well, I like that word, and I like that definition. The view that a coherent definition of God must be first put forward before the question of the existence of God can meaningfully be discussed. And I definitely think that's a very valid view. You can't really talk about existence or non-existence of God unless somebody throws down a definition of what they mean by God. Generally on this program, we deal with the mainstream, I think, general Christian view of it,
right.
even though that still encompasses many different beliefs.
Well, I'm more than happy, I've made this point before. I'm interested in what people believe. I'm interested in why they believe it. More importantly, I'm interested in why they think someone else should believe it. And so, when I ask somebody about what they believe with regard to God, oddly enough, very few people actually begin by defining what they believe is God or objecting to my generic definition.
Right.
You tell me what it is that you believe, define it as best you can, and then we can actually have a discussion about it. And if you tell me that, God is love, well, congratulations. By your definition, I'm a theist because I believe that love actually exists conceptually and not as a thing, or perhaps as a chemical state. In any case, why do that? Why say God is love? Or why don't you say love? There are two words. They're supposed to have slightly distinct meanings. One of them is supposed to have, this value add that distinguishes it from some other word, and you're equating the two of them. It's like equating philosophy and religion. They're different. They're subsets. For example, religion is a subset of philosophy, and maybe a step cousin. But if you just say, well, religion's just a philosophy, or philosophy's just a religion, no, you're oversimplifying, and you're doing it. These people who say that God is love. Congratulations, you're an atheist in any practical sense of the word. If you think that God is just love, that there's no actual intelligence behind it, and then what you're doing really is saying, I don't believe in a God in any traditional sense, but because admitting that I'm an atheist would be difficult and uncomfortable and come with a lot of baggage, I think that I'm just going to define myself as perhaps a spiritual person, or say that love is God. God is love. Hey, there it works. I believe in a God. It's love. And now all of a sudden, you think that you seem eminently reasonable to everybody around you, that you haven't taken this hard line that God doesn't exist, and you haven't snubbed the religious people by pretending that, or by claiming that that their beliefs aren't justified, or that you find them delusional, or that you don't share them. You've tried to appeal to everybody, but in doing so, you've taken two words that actually have meaning, that actually convey ideas that are useful for communicating, and you've rendered them both useless. You have devolved language to the point that it's meaningless. If something can mean anything to anyone, then it means nothing to no one. There's a reason why we use distinct terms for this. And I think that God is love people are posers. But, I do agree with them. Love's a great thing.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to get to here is the idea that agnosticism is not, there is no choice between atheism and agnosticism. You can be atheist and agnostic,
right.
And you can be theist and agnostic. But theist and agnostic, it doesn't quite go together in a logical fashion. I think that, and I guess I have some issues with the question of the theistic agnostic, in that whenever I tend to discuss the theism with someone who claims to also be an agnostic, what I find is that they begin coming up with attributes for this God that they don't know.
Yeah.
So that what happens is you have a God that you claim you have no knowledge of, that you believe in, and then I get these continuing attributes for the God. So it's like, not only do they believe in a God that they say they don't know anything about, but then they start telling me about the God that they aren't supposed to know anything about.
Right.
So, for example, I had a discussion online with someone who said that he was agnostic. He labeled himself as agnostic, but then went on to say that he felt that the thing that made him think there could be a God is that the universe is very orderly in his opinion, and therefore, he thinks that there's got to be something that put it together. Well, when I'm looking at this, I'm saying, first you say you're an agnostic, which means you're saying that you know nothing about God. Then you're turning right around and saying that you think a God created the universe. Well, that's something about God. Now, you may preface that with believe versus no, and you're getting on iffy territory there, but the next thing to say is that if that God did create that universe, then he would make an orderly universe. So now you're telling me that the God you don't know anything about you think is orderly, and there's no reason for it because you don't know anything about this God, and also that this God created the universe, which you have no reason to believe that since you say you're an agnostic and you know nothing about God.
Yeah, you
so
may in fact
why are
be.
you, well, it's like why continue to build your assumptions and build more and more assumptions
Right.
about something that you've already established you know nothing about. It would be like me sitting here trying to talk about physics, and I know nothing about it, so I'm going on and on about physics, just making stuff up. I mean, that's exactly what it is. And then say, finally get to the end of it and say, but I never claimed I knew anything. I'm just saying what I think.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of a dishonest. I mean, people, we see this all the time where people think the words are interchangeable. They'll say, I'm the agnostic, and then go on to talk about what they believe or don't believe. When belief isn't an issue with agnosticism,
Right.
what we're talking about is knowledge. You may well be an agnostic, and yet you may still believe in a God or disbelieve in a God for a variety of reasons. And, okay, if you say you're an agnostic and then you start defining the characteristics of a God you believe in, what you're really doing is saying, I don't know for sure, but I believe. And my belief that this is possible is based on presumptions that I'm making about characteristics about a God. And while I agree that still doesn't qualify as knowledge, it does put your agnostic position on very shaky ground.
Well, and it puts your theism on a completely illogical level, because what happens then is that you're basically saying that in the absence of any knowledge, I'm just making up all this stuff that I believe about God and gods.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so, and that's valid, why?
Yeah.
And it reminds me, one of the quotes, let me see if I can find it. I loved it. I just highlighted it earlier, and I thought, oh, that's just worth repeating. And now I'll probably not be able to find it, but it said something about.
Well, while you're looking for that, I'll remind everybody that it's a little after 4 now. We're on to 4:30. As a reminder, we'll be going to El Arroyo on 5th Street after the show's over, starting around 5 o'clock, lasting till 7-ish or maybe a little bit later. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come down and join us. If you're coming down to punch me in the face, don't bother. I was thinking about that with the guy from the other day. If you want to call back in sometime or email me, I think we may be able to create a fundraiser where we have a boxing match, and maybe split the winning 60-40 with the winner. So if you knock me out, you get 60% of it. Maybe we can sell some tickets. Who knows?
I found the quote. It was on a different article.
Oh.
It was from Britannica. That's why it wasn't in my sheets. But the British mathematician and philosopher of science, W.K. Clifford, and this is from 1876, in his essay on the ethics of belief, says, "It is wrong always, everywhere, and for everyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence."
I couldn't agree more.
So if a person is telling me, I know nothing about God, but God created the universe, I think, because otherwise I don't know how it's here, and I think God is really orderly, and that's why we have an orderly universe, and you start, the more you tell me about God, if you continue to call yourself an agnostic, you're basing it on zero. You're just making things up, and so I agree with Clifford in saying that you're wrong, always, everywhere, and no matter who you are, if you're telling me that you believe anything upon insufficient evidence. And when you say agnostic, you're saying zero evidence, zero knowledge. You're admitting to zero knowledge and then going on to tell me what you think you know.
Yeah, there's this kind of idea in colloquial speak, and I wish I could say there's nothing wrong with it. I do have a problem with it. Many times in casual communication, like theory takes on a different meaning than it does in scientific theory. Agnostic takes on certain meanings. Atheist takes on certain meanings, and they're probably fine. The average Joe, when he says atheist, he's talking about somebody who says there is no God. Well, on some level, as long as you're willing to talk about things that loosely, kind of street level view of it, yeah, okay, that's an okay definition of an atheist. And as a matter of fact, I'll happily say it. There is no God. But what I'm doing is I'm making a statement about what I believe and not what I know to any absolute degree of certainty. when we start making distinctions and we start talking about, actual philosophical positions, atheist has a distinct definition, and that is a lack of theism or without theism. It's a response to a theistic position. And the one thing is that the reason I don't define God and say, this is God and I don't believe in him, is because I think that's insane. I'd rather have you define God and then have a discussion about whether or not I believe in the God you believe in and why. Not just because I think it's a way to clarify things. I think it's the only way to really have a good communication about it. What it does is it allows both of us to learn something. I learn what your idea of a God is. I learn why you believe in it. I learn why you think other people should believe in it. I can then assess that and find out where I agree and where I disagree, because I think there are many areas where we would agree more than we disagree, but we're going to stumble over certain presuppositions that individuals have. For example, Ray Comfort, we talked about him a little bit on yesterday's show, where he's got this thing, I think atheists evolved from, I'm not going to try and do his accent, he's from New Zealand. He thinks atheists evolved from chicken, and it was just a little humorous, almost, attack on atheists, saying, you guys are out here attacking Christians, but you're afraid to attack Muslims. Are you kidding me? My coffee cup is named Muhammad. I'm not afraid to talk about what I disagree with and other beliefs. There's and I'm forgetting where this is taking place, if somebody can remind me. There's a young woman in another country that's being potentially executed for witchcraft. Why? Because she made a man impotent, supposedly, by witchcraft. She's illiterate. They hand her a confession that she can't read, that they didn't read to her. It's in Saudi Arabia, and they have her sign it with a thumbprint. She's illiterate. She can't read the confession. The confession isn't read to her, and yet they put her thumbprint on it, and now they're going to execute her because some guy claimed that she used witchcraft to make him impotent. Now, not only, as Dennis pointed out, are we no longer living in the 14th century, I came up with a solution. Let's send Viagra to Saudi Arabia so they'll stop killing women because they're, well, I won't say that. It's insane. I realize that there's people all around the world that have different social structures, and they haven't all progressed to the same state. And some of them have been, the progress has been retarded by religion. Some of it has been prompted by religion. I'll happily admit that religion's responsible for some great universities that helped bring the world into a new century. But it was still fighting against itself. The reason for those universities is because they needed scribes. They needed people who were literate. And the progress is a sort of byproduct of that was unintended. No, it's not like the church has said, I think if we start teaching people, maybe we'll start learning new things and the world will get better and we'll be able to cure diseases and live longer and come up with fabulous new technologies that make life easier and more wonderful. People in different areas have progressed at different rates. We need to find out what's inhibiting the progress, what is promoting progress, and make changes globally, starting locally, so that never again do I need to hear some nonsense that some guy couldn't get it up and decided to go after an illiterate woman and blame her, and now she's subject to be executed unless the king steps in? Are you kidding me? I mean, granted, I got sidetracked from the agnosticism and atheism discussion, but, people say, well, what's the harm in religion? Okay, well, there's one of them. Well, yes, but, guys like Ray Comfort, which is why I got sidetracked, would say, well, you don't attack Muslims, you attack Christians. I don't attack Muslims or Christians. I attack ideas. All ideas. Any idea is open to criticism, to critical evaluation, to skepticism. And the stupider it is, and the more close to home it is, the more I'm going to attack it. So if you ask me why I focus more on Christians, it's because I live in a country where 80% of people are Christians. And you know what? I don't think that many of them actually believe the things that are dogmatic and asserted from the pulpit. I think they believe in belief, as Daniel Dennett points out. I think they go to socialize. I think, as Yassic, our first caller today, I don't think that many of them perhaps actually believe in hell. I don't think that many of them are that concerned over it. They're going through the motions. And you know what? I'm happy for those people because they perhaps have the chance to escape from the shackles of religion. But don't pretend that, Ray, if your best argument is that well, you can attack us, but Muslims are worse. That's your best argument? The best thing you can come up with is that atheists are afraid to attack Muslims and Muslims are worse than Christians? Okay. If that's your best argument, I rescind my offer to debate you at any time, because it'd be pointless. You come with arguments like the banana is the atheist nightmare. You talk about, atheists were evolved from chickens, partly because you don't understand evolution, and partly because you don't understand atheists, and partly because you're just backtracking as fast as you can, because you put out these Way of the Master series, and we offer point-by-point, second-by-second rebuttals. You can go to ironchariots.org to find those. You put out these blog posts, and you get atheists coming in to say, no, you missed the point. This is it, and you're wrong. Here's this, and you're wrong. You're making all kinds of wild assertions, and you've got nothing to back it up. Your best argument is that we're not Muslims. Christianity, it's not Islam. Good for you.
Get a bumper sticker.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm channeling Pat Condell right now, but
No.
so anyway, I don't know. We want to take this because it's actually about agnostics. So
Sure.
is it David?
Yes, this is
How you doing?
pretty good.
What do you want to comment on? I'm sorry I got off sidetracked.
No, that's all right. I was just hanging out here on Sunday, checking out the show, and so I was wondering if you guys could clarify something for me, because you had mentioned that agnostics first believe that there is no God, and then they go on to give characteristics of what they think a God might be.
No, that was a specific example she was talking about. I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, what I was saying is that I had a discussion with someone online who claimed to be an agnostic theist, which means that he does believe, well, he said that he called himself an agnostic, which
Right.
means he is claiming initially no knowledge of any gods.
Mm-hmm.
And then he claimed that he did believe that there had to be or could be something because of the universe exists and it's orderly.
Right.
Which my response to that is, then you do think that gods would have been called upon to create the universe, otherwise you can't think of how it exists, and you also believe that the orderliness of the universe must have been produced by a god. So he's sort of claiming things about gods, but then he's saying that he has no knowledge of any gods. And so I'm like, well, then why are you claiming to have, where's this information coming from then that you're basing these assumptions on, was what I was asking him.
Right, and I guess what my concern with that, how that works out, is that even if you're agnostic, I think that you're still free to speculate.
Sure.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
could draw the poor analogy of, like, you might not be a mechanic, but you might have ideas of how your car's, not working correctly. And even though, you're not...
Except that we do have some knowledge of cars. So you would have to take something that we have no knowledge of, like Bigfoot, and
Right,
then say that the person is speculating that Bigfoot lives in social groups and that they rear their young to the age of 10, and the more they go on, the more ridiculous they sound, because we don't even know if Bigfoot exists.
Right, and those pictures are compelling sometimes, but I still think there's room for agnostics to be able to be speculative in nature.
Sure. Yeah, and it's perfectly reasonable. As I point out, they're not mutually exclusive terms.
I don't know if I would call
right.
it reasonable. I would say that if somebody is saying that there's no knowledge at all available to them, or in some cases to anyone, about this thing, that if they go on to speculate, I would have to say it's not reasonable. They certainly have a right to do it, and they certainly have the capacity to do it, but it's not based on reason. Reason would mean that they're saying that they are starting from some base of knowledge, but they're saying that there is no base of knowledge, and yet they're going to speculate.
I don't want to overstate what they're agnostic about. They could be agnostic on the issue of the existence of a God, but not be agnostic on whatever presuppositions and rules lead them to certain beliefs about the nature of potential gods.
It's kind of like, here's a good quote.
So I don't want to draw too fine a line.
Here's a quote I think that sums it up pretty well, and this is from Bertrand Russell. And he says, "The existence and nature of God is a subject of which I can discuss only half. If one arrives at a negative conclusion concerning the first part of the question, the existence of God, the second part of the question, the nature of God, does not arise." So when a person is saying that they can, we can't even establish that this thing exists, how do we then talk about the nature of the thing that doesn't exist or that may not exist?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that we're discussing?
My overall conclusion on this is that somebody who claims to be agnostic or is agnostic I don't think that it's terribly unreasonable for them to allow for skepticism to, I guess, stay active, and that they can gain evidence or make new claims or speculate as to, further evidence of a God or further evidence that there is no God.
Yeah, I mean, if they just want to say, like, well, maybe there is something there, I just don't know. But then when they start telling me the thing is orderly and the thing creates a universe, and then I'm looking at them going, well, where are you getting that from? Where did you go from I know nothing about it to it's orderly and it created the universe?
And in that exchange, I don't think that they're necessarily being unreasonable. I just think that they're going through the process of analyzing evidence or exploring feelings and things like that.
But if they're saying that there's evidence, then they're not an agnostic, because they're saying that there is some knowledge available. That's my point. If he really is agnostic, now it's one. If he just wants to say I'm a Gnostic theist and that I believe there is some information and I base my speculative belief on that, then that's fine. But when he tells me he's agnostic, and then if he starts to bring up what he considers to be
that's
evidence,
what I'm talking about with the fine line. He could be agnostic on the exact precise issue of the factual existence, but not agnostic on whether or not there's evidence that might support it. But that's part of the problem. Is I think that's drawing too fine a line. I agree with you to some extent that critical thinking, skepticism on all these issues are healthy. I advocate all of that. I advocate investigation of these things. At some point, though, I think investigation has to kind of stop until there's some new reason. But when you say that it's reasonable for them to come up with characteristics for a God, what reason is there? I mean, it seems to me that what they're doing is taking kind of a conventional idea of God as a creator, for example, and just accepting it without justification. And then I don't know how they get from A to B there.
Well, I guess the whole concept is that I don't think that things could be, you can't just stop investigating. I think that if that was the mentality, then we would all still think that the world is flat.
Do you think we should be actively investigating whether people can jump off buildings and fly?
Sure, why not?
I'll tell you why not.
If you have people willing
Would you like to volunteer?
for that
Is that a serious answer?
But
is that a serious answer?
I mean, I'm just saying that it's an absurd question, but there's obviously an absurd answer to it.
Right. And why is the question absurd?
And the answer absurd.
Because, I mean, if somebody was really wanting to test the laws of gravity, then so be it. I think that there's a nice wide body of work to determine how that outcome is in the end. And all I'm saying is that if people want to continue to explore the evidence or the lack of evidence of a deity or a god or what have you, then that could...
What evidence? I mean, you say that we should continue to explore, and I'm fine, as long as there's something to actually explore. What is there to explore?
The existence or non-existence of a god or a deity.
Okay, and how do you do that?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, if you don't know how to do it...
But my problem is that you're saying that if someone says that they're agnostic, that for whatever reason, that exploration, for them to be going down that road seems unreasonable, and I don't think it is.
No, I'm not. I'm
not
not saying that that an agnostic who's searching for the answer is unreasonable. What I'm saying is that the agnostic that starts putting forward attributes of the God that he's saying he doesn't have any information about is a little bit nuts.
And that's what I'm saying is that I don't think that that's nuts. I don't think that's unreasonable, because I think that...
That's the definition of unreasonable. When you have no reason to be saying what you're saying, that's unreasonable.
And I guess what this comes down to is my disagreement of contextualizing it so easily or so simply.
If anybody's oversimplifying, I'd say it's you, because you're not giving any reason for your advocation. You say you're claiming something's reasonable and not providing a reason.
And that's the whole point, is that there doesn't have to be a reason.
Well, then it's not reasonable.
I mean, no. Well, yeah, but you're saying that there has to be a reason.
There you agree.
To be reasonable, yes, it does have to have a reason.
What I'm saying is, when I'm talking about, and this came from the studio, and I'll credit them because it's a much better way of saying it, there isn't necessarily an intellectual cutoff for exploration. It's a pragmatic one. I'm not saying that if somebody could
but
actually...
how are you defining pragmatic, though? pragmatic to you.
It's the reason that I gave the example about testing people jumping off a building and see if they can fly. Because there are people who claim that they can fly. They do it all the time. And you know what we end up doing with them? We end up locking them up.
And you want me to agree with that?
It happens. I mean, when I asked you first, you said, yes, we should be investigating this. And so you feel
No, I said that people were free to investigate it.
He asked if it should be investigated, and you answered, yeah, why not?
Right, exactly, and that's what I'm saying is in this whole exercise.
Then you said, yeah, it should be investigated.
I'll tell you why not, because it's unreasonable. There's no good reason to think that people can actually jump off a building and fly. And so allowing people to test this just means that we're killing people.
And so then what's the problem with people continuing to explore the existence or non-existence of a deity or God? Why does that have to be unreasonable?
Nobody said that there was a problem.
If they're claiming to be agnostic.
No, personal interest is fine. Yeah. You can go and explore the existence of a God. My point is that when we're talking about whether or not it's reasonable to do so, and as soon as somebody gives me a good reason why, and I still read religious stuff, I talk to religious people all the time, I'm open to any reasoned argument or evidence. But I'm not on a personal exploration to find God because I have no good reason to think that it's going to be fruitful. And this is based on years of previous searches.
Right, and all I'm saying is that that's fine. I mean, that's a personal journey that you've come to that conclusion with.
Okay.
But I don't think that anybody, I guess we're going back to the same argument, and we're kind of going in circles. But
yeah, because you're saying something's reasonable and admitting it's not.
Excuse me?
Because you're saying something's reasonable and then admitting that it's not reasonable. If it's personally interesting, satisfying, if you want to go out and explore this, nobody's saying that shouldn't happen.
Right.
So what's the problem?
Well, the problem is that you're saying it's unreasonable, and I don't think that it's unreasonable.
Okay, then explain to me how it's reasonable.
Because people are free to do whatever they want to do.
Okay, that's not reason.
Nobody's saying that they're not
personal
free.
Preference.
Yeah, nobody's trying to stop anyone.
I've got the freedom to go out and run naked down the street, but it doesn't mean it's a reasonable thing to do, and it certainly doesn't mean anybody wants me to.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the same. It would be the same for turning over rocks and looking for fairies. I'm not going to stop you from going out and looking for fairies and trying to prove that fairies exist, but I don't see any reason to be doing it. And unless somebody can give me a reason for doing it, it's an unreasonable thing to do. That doesn't mean it's an illegal thing to do, and it doesn't mean I'm going to stop you.
You go out and do whatever nutty thing you do.
But don't call it reasonable if it's not reasonable.
It's, when we're talking about this, we've also talked about investigating psychics. Well, why don't you guys investigate psychics? Well, psychics have been investigated forever. You know what? Every claim of miracle, every single claim of supernatural experience that's ever been tested, failed. Come up with one that can pass a scientific experiment, pass one that can show evidence, and all of a sudden we're in a position where it becomes reasonable to continue investigating them. But how long do you keep investigating claims when they fail and fail and fail and fail? And that's what they were talking about when they said it was a pragmatic thing. You can go flip over rocks and look for fairies. You can go on a meditative search for God. You can do whatever you want, but don't tell me it's reasonable. You're making the claim that your pursuit's reasonable. Give the evidence that shows how it's reasonable. We got like 30 seconds before we're off the air. I'm sorry. Anybody who didn't get through on the telephone can email tv@atheist-community.org. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us at El Arroyo here in about 30 minutes or so. It's on 5th Street. They put the address on your screen earlier. We'll be back again next week. Thanks to Tracie and thanks to everybody on the crew list. Steve, Ellie, Joe. Well, it went too fast for me to even read it. You guys are behind. Be safe. We'll see you in a week.